Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about probably my favorite springtime bass fishing bait, if not my favorite bass fishing bait of all time. Everything you need to know about it, how you can catch more fish this spring by using this technique. We're going to break it all down in today's video: the rod, the reel, the line, setting it up, everything you need to know so you can go out on the water and catch more fish. Then at the end of today's video, I'll have it linked to another video of how to actually go out there, find fish, and catch fish with it. So the entire masterclass will be laid out in today's video, and then in the very near future here, we'll get out on the water and actually get to fishing this again, show you how to catch even more fish on it. So stay tuned, let's get right into it. It's going to be a lot of information, but we're going to cover everything you need to know. All right, so the bait that we're going to be talking about today is the Finesse swim bait. If you're new to the channel, this is probably one of my favorite baits of all time. I catch so many fish on it every year. Big smallmouth, I've caught spotted bass on it, I've caught largemouth bass on it, but I live up in the Northeast, so I fish a lot of smallmouth, and this is absolute smallmouth candy up here. If you've been watching the channel for some time, you know I love the Finesse swim bait, and you know that it's one of my favorites. And I'm gonna keep talking about it every single year because of how much I believe in this bait right here. It's one that I have worked many years to continue to learn and develop and catch a lot of fish with, and all the different setups and everything that go along with it. So first thing we're gonna have to talk about is your rod and reel. And I've fished numerous over the year to figure out what are some of the best. So what I have landed on now as my favorite, and I've been doing it for some time now, you guys have known that, is actually a casting setup. So this is the Icon topwater and jerkbait rod from Cashin. This is the 6'9" extra fast medium action rod, medium power rod. So this is like my go-to. It's actually my jerkbait rod, it's my topwater rod, but when I'm fishing, I have multiple of these now because I fish it so much. When I'm fishing a jerkbait, I'll also be fishing a swim bait, and it's the same setup that I use for both. It just has the perfect tip to cast this light bait. It's basically a spinning rod, but with a casting reel on it. It's a spinning rod blank, but made into a casting rod. So you can have a little bit more control with your reel, and that's what I like. A couple other things that I like about this: I put my bait casting reel on here. This is a 7.2 SLX DC. Doesn't have to be a DC. Doesn't even have to be the Shimano SLX, whatever. Just a 7-gear ratio reel. Straight 12-pound test fluorocarbon. That's what I go with for two reasons. One, more abrasion resistant than the 8-pound test leader that I'm going to use on this second setup here. And two, straight fluorocarbon sinks. So you want this bait, the biggest thing with this bait is always maintaining bottom contact. So you want this bait to get down to the bottom and stay on the bottom. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to go with straight fluorocarbon, because it will not create a bow in your line down to the bait where it's going to naturally want to lift from the bottom. It's going to have a direct connection to your bait where it's naturally going to want to stay down on the bottom, just a little bit easier. And I use the thinnest diameter I can, so that's why I go with the 12-pound test. You can go with 10 if you want. You probably break off a couple extra times. You're really pounding this bait into the rocks down there, so you want something that has a little bit of abrasion resistance. But that's the setup. It's really light in the hands. It's a great feeling rod. I use this thing so much and catch a ton of fish on it. It's one of my favorite ways to do that. And it's something that I've evolved into. I used to not use a casting rod, which we're going to talk about right now, but I've noticed that I catch more fish with the casting rod. I hook up better, I land more fish. If I have one pull next to the boat, I can give it drag without worrying about it pulling out that light wire hook or bending it out, because the second setup that I used to fish is a spinning rod. And if you're new to fishing, I will mention it in the video at the end of this one, and I'll mention it right now. If you are new to fishing, you're trying to get someone into fishing, and you're trying to teach them this technique because of how easy it is, there's nothing wrong with using a spinning rod. I've used a spinning rod for years. It's super easy to do this, and this is the most user-friendly technique that's out there on the market. I take this Cashin core spinning rod is what I have, 7-foot medium power, fast action, literally just a little bit longer than what this guy is right here. That's it. It has a slightly slower tip to it. It doesn't have the extra fast action as a fast action. That doesn't really make a difference. The power is the same, and it's pretty much rated for the same baits. Then I take a Shimano Sedona, I put 15-pound test lime green braid on here, and if you're just learning this technique for the first time, that helps as well, because you'll be able to bottom check yourself. You can throw that bait out there and watch your lime green braid go out, knowing that your bait is still sinking, and then it'll lay slack on the water when it actually hits the bottom, and you can keep that bait on the bottom. So as you're winding your bait slowly, every 10-15 cranks, you'll kill your reel. And if your line starts going back out, you know your bait left the bottom and you're reeling too fast. So then you know to go ahead and reel a little slower and let that sink back down to the bottom, and it's going to get you more bites. However, it will naturally want to pull up off the bottom because you'll have that arc in the braid. Just something you'll have to work through. If you're using the line as a strike indicator like you're supposed to, it will work just fine. You'll have no problem. And then I tie an 8 or 10 pound test fluorocarbon leader on here, like 10-15 foot of it, and I'm good to go. So you can take this bait, tie it onto either one of these rods, and it'll work just fine. This, you have to set your drag right, so when you hook a 5-pound smallmouth on this and get it up next to the boat, if it wants to pull, it's got smooth drag to pull and isn't going to bend out your hook. But for rod and reel, that's as simple as it gets. Those are the two setups that I like to use. You probably already have this one if you want to try the technique without getting a new rod, or if you have that other one, that's the way to go. It's a really nice setup to go ahead and do this with. And then you need 2 other components, and that's literally it. One being a jig head. I've gone through numerous jig heads over the years. There's different ones that work for different purposes. For me, I've fished a couple that are very important to me. I'm going to mention all of them. The first one being a ball head jig. Straight Gamakatsu ball head jig. I pour it myself out in my garage. I pour a 1/4 ounce and that's it. They're cheap to pour. That's the biggest thing for me. When I'm fishing lakes that are filled with rocks and I'm losing a ton of them, they're cheap to pour and I can lose a ton of baits and not care about it. I'll fish those. I've fished those forever. That's the technique that I started with. That's when I first started learning this technique. I poured my own jigs. I wasn't sponsored by anybody. I wasn't working with anybody at the time. I poured my own jigs. I was good to go, and that's what I used. I also started to work with Pulse Fish last year. You guys saw that. I was using their jig heads for a while, the Pulse Head jig heads. They were great. The screw lock keeps your bait up on there. I got those in a 1/4 ounce. They're great baits as well, or great jig heads as well. This year we did a little bit bigger deal with 6 Cents, and I'm going to be with them for the year. As you know, I've been with them over the years as well, which we'll talk about here in the swim baits. They've been killer for me, but I'm going to be using the 6 Cents Finesse swim bait jig heads this year. They come in a 3/16 and a 5/16. Both sizes. I'm going to play around with both of them. I'm going to see more this year. Sometimes that extra 1/16 ounce might help keep it on the bottom better. Sometimes this might get snagged a little bit less with the lighter 1/16 ounce. But to be honest, the 5/16 is probably going to be the size I use the most. And these have a 2/0 hook in them, and they come in some shad patterns, plain lead. The color of your jig head does not matter. Just get a jig head you like that has a good 1 or 2/0 hook in it that can support one of these small little swim baits, and you'll be good to go. So if it looks pretty proportional like that, where you have your hook kind of halfway, 1/3 of the way back into the bait, you're going to be perfect. 1/4 ounce size that I use the most. I use a 3/8 every once in a while, but I don't usually do that often. And you can use an 1/8 every once in a while if you want it even shallower. Don't do that often either. 1/4 ounce could probably get it done with just that one singular size. And you, like I said, you want it proportional. The bigger this hook is, the less action this bait's going to have and the less fish you're going to catch. So 1 2/0 hook max. That's the biggest hook that I would put in that bait. We'll show you how to rig one of these in just a second, but we got to talk about swim baits here. Again, numerous brands out there on the market that'll work. I've used Kitex in the past. I've used all that kind of stuff when I first started. I've been fishing these ones for about the past 3 years now, and they're the 6 Cents Divine swim baits. These are the 3.2 inch. When you're fishing a swim bait for this technique, 3 inch is like the magic number, somewhere in there. 3 to 3.5 inch bait, that is the magic number. Those baits, especially in the 6 Cents version, I've fished the 3/8. The 3/8 is a great bait for like a swim jig trailer, stuff like that, where you're fishing your bait a little bit faster. When you're crawling this bait on the bottom, that smaller size is more important because there's less plastic in the tail and it wobbles easier. So you can fish at slower speeds and still get that tail to move. And you want that tail just moving like this, because a lot of times I'm fishing this bait in 40, 50 degree water. That bait doesn't move very quick. The fish aren't moving very quick. So that tail just subtly kicking like this, that's going to catch you a bunch of fish doing that. So that's how I like to fish that bait. You could use a 3.3 Kitech. You could use whatever you like. These ones have been killer for me. I've been catching a ton of fish on these over the past couple years. I've gone through packs and packs of these, and I've really started to enjoy fishing these baits. I keep 2 colors with me. Pro Blue, Ghost Ice Minnow. I am going to play around with some more colors this year to see how this fish react to different colors, but what you'll notice with all of my colors, they're either a base of white or they're a base of like a natural translucent light bait fish color. So like the Pro Blue, that's pretty much a translucent plastic. It has a little bit of a blue tint on the back, and the belly has some silver glitter in it, but it's translucent, it's a natural-ish color. Ghost Ice Minnow, straight white. I have platinum white, they're straight white. Anything like that, get a solid white color for when that water's a little bit dirtier, and get a Pro Blue or like a natural bait fish color for when the water's cleaner. If I had to pick one, it would be Pro Blue. That's the one that I fish 9 times out of 10. I'll reach for this one before I reach for any other color. It just catches fish. Honestly, it just works. It's one of my favorite ways and colors to fish. Experimenting over the years, I've tried numerous things, but I always go back and reach for the same stuff, which I find very interesting because it just works and it just catches fish. The last thing you need to know is how to rig this dude up. First thing you're gonna do is tie your jig head onto your rod. We're not going fishing today, unfortunately, but we would tie this on first. So no terminal tackle, you tie that straight to your line, nothing else. So straight line right to your bait. Palomar knot is what I use, and then you're good to go. The keepers on these Finesse swim bait heads are really nice. They have like that barbed keeper, and the thick head of this plastic holds really well on there. So all you're gonna do is go ahead and line your bait up. These Divine swim baits have a center line that runs right down them. I'll line it up to see where that bait's gonna come out on the hook and be straight. I'll center it up right in the bait there, and I'll feed it around just like I would any other jig trailer and pop it out the back, and then push it up onto the keeper and get it right up on there straight and ready to fish. So that would be it for rigging up the bait. The last thing that I like to do, depending on your swim bait head, the ball heads I've done it with, this one I've done it with, I'll back that bait off just a little bit or right before I push it up on, and I'll put a dot of super glue right there. I don't have any right now, I gotta restock, but I'll put a dot of super glue right there, and then I'll push that bait up to touch it up against that head, and that will lock it on there for an extra fish or two. So you'll get a little bit more life out of your baits. The only other thing you could really do to modify these is dip the tail in some chartreuse if you really wanted to. I don't even do that. I find that they bite it just fine, plain color that way. But if you wanted a little dip, catch a couple more fish that way, something a little different they haven't seen, no problem doing that either. But other than that, there's no modification. That is the bait. It is the simplest technique that I've ever fished for bass, and it catches so many fish because of how simple it is. It's one of my favorite ways to get out there and fish. I can't wait to get back out on the water and get to fishing this thing and show you guys how effective it is. And if you want to support the channel and help me keep making videos like this for you guys, you can use my code Quince on the 6th Sense website. You'll save 10% off your order on the swim baits or the jig heads, or anything on their website for that matter. You can save 10% off your entire order, and you'll be helping me out a ton to continue making videos like this for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, check this video out right here talking about how to fish this bait, where to find fish, all that kind of stuff. Hit the subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.